Hello and Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Ruwah Shah show. We are back after a long time and today we are also going to discuss Kashmir once again. As you know that it has been a very difficult time for Kashmir post August 5 action of the Indian state in Kashmir when they abrogated the Article 370. So in the last few months, the press in Kashmir has particularly been facing extremely hard times. With the scrapping of the Article 370 on August 5 by the Indian government, the situation in the valley has worsened. Particularly, the scribe community has been facing challenges to work in a free and fair manner, with the state booking journalists under hardened crimes and under hardened laws and the unlawful activities prevention act particularly that they have been using. How difficult is it for a media person, a journalist, to work from Kashmir in a free and a fair manner? To discuss this, we have a very special guest tonight with us, Mr. Qazi Shibli. He is the editor of a Kashmir-based news magazine called the Kashmiriyat. And if we can have Mr. Shibli join us now, we'll be talking to him in detail. Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Shibli. Thank you for joining us.
Walaikum salam, Ruwah. It's good to be here with you.
Thank you. Mr. Shibli, you were detained for 9 months recently. Could you tell us more about yourself?
Uh, see, uh, I have been I have been working as a journalist for the past 2 years now, and I'm the editor. I'm one of the founding editors, perhaps, of a news magazine called the Kashmiri. It's a Kashmir-based news magazine, and we started this venture in 2017, and we have been doing a lot of ground zero reporting from Kashmir, and it was just before the abrogation of Article 370 that we broke into a news that is particularly mentioning the deployment, the heightened deployment, and the presence and the movement of security troopers in Jammu Kashmir. So we broke into this news, and um, a day later, I think it was the 27th of July, the last year, and on the 28th of July, I was summoned to the police station, and then I was later questioned regarding a lot of news stories that we had done in the past 2 years, and then it was unfortunate. Uh, in the meantime, I would want to tell you something, which is that the government of India has been has imposed internet ban in Kashmir. So we have a partial internet ban here. So in the meantime, if my internet goes off, so that's a message that that the internet is gone. That's what's happening in Kashmir. That's what has been happening, in fact, since August 5th, when I was telling you about my arrest. It was the time when the government of India imposed a complete communication clampdown in Kashmir. So post this, I had been questioned regarding multiple news stories that we had done on our website, the Kashmirian. Uh, so post this, I was taken into detention, and I was lodged into this place called Bareilly, which is in North India, and I was kept there for a period of 9 months, and my crime. The only crime I was told of was that I had committed journalism. I had reported facts, and without any bias, without any political bend. So yeah, you know, the state of journalism right now in Kashmir and in India is very poor. The press freedom is being curtailed rather, uh, by tooth and nail by the present regime, by the Modi-led government in India. Yeah, so it's very tough. It's getting very tough for journalists to work, with the sort of harassment, with the sort of, we have seen in the past in Kashmir, the number of attacks that have risen against journalists, the sort of intimidation that press throughout India has faced. It gets very tough for one to work as a journalist in Kashmir.
Shibi, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I do. I do.
Yeah, so I was asking you that, you were in a way targeted by the state, and you had to spend a long time in the prison. Under what laws were you arrested, and what were the charges against you?
See, in India, there's a trend in media right now. Those who espouse Hindutva, the ideology that gave rise to Hindu nationalism, you know, the government is trying to purge uh, all the manifestations uh, of questioning, reasoning, and different thought from the national debate. The coordinated hate campaigns waged on social media, social networking sites, on what on the pop-up war rooms, the mainstream media in India, against journalists and media who dare to speak uh, or write on the subjects that aggravate, you know that give give that blast this false notion of development that the Indian state wants to portray. And in case of Kashmir, the journalists who report from ground zero and challenge this very myth of normalcy are put into jails, and that's what I exactly believe. What happened with me? Our reportage was very insightful, very courageous, and with show it in fact was very sane. And this unbudged attitude of ours in our news stories are categorized into this formulation of what the state has lately dubbed as bad journalism. And there are two places for such journalists who are bad journalists. One is in the profiles of the police stations, and second is in the roles of the jails. So I personally was not informed. I told you the only crime I had committed, which my captors, three of my captors, informed me during my detention period in the local police station, was that I had committed journalism. So post that, my it was only after a span of 56 days that my family came to meet me, and they told me of the charges I was booked under. There were actually no charges because it's a public safety act that has been called as the lawless law by the Amnesty International. Uh, so I was told later that I had been booked under that very law, which you know, because the Indian state right now is using these laws, uh, to muzzle the voices of independent press and independent media throughout India, not just in Kashmir. There's this notion of the good journalists and the bad journalists, and the state unfortunately wants too much interference uh, in what media does and what it does not. And this categorization of a good journalist and bad journalist is a worrisome trend. uh, there are these good journalists who are promoted by the state, and there is this independent media which wants to report facts, which most of the times happens to be against the fabrications that the state wants the public to keep misinformed about. So there are these journalists who work on ground zero, and they want to, like in the case of Kashmir, the state wants to tell the world, the Indian state wants to tell the world that there's normalcy in Kashmir, everything is fine in Kashmir. But there are reporters who are reporting facts from the ground, who are telling the stories that matter the most, which included me, and which includes a lot of people who are, that's my friend. That's my friend. I mean, our work colleagues also. I mean, Gauhar Gilani, people, prominent journalists like Gauhar Gilani. I mean, my friends Fahad Shah, Hazid Qadri. I mean, these people have been detained by the state, and these people have been questioned regarding a lot of stories because they break into this myth of what the state wants to portray as, the normalcy and peace. Because we are telling facts from the ground, which break that very myth of the state. The state wants to tell us that everything is normal, but the facts on the ground do not agree with them. So I told you about the story that we had done regarding this heightened presence and movement of security troopers. The state at that time wanted to tell us, no, they're not going to abrogate the Article 370, and we broke into the story, which actually, which actually, which actually defied the state's narrative. In fact, which spoke the truth. So, you know, you got into that story, and that's what the state calls as the red zone. So you got into this red zone of the state, and immediately you were booked under the Public Safety Act, which is, once I was in the jail, I felt that, you had been I had been doing a lot of reporting about the Public Safety Act, but once I entered the jail, I felt it was more draconian than one could imagine. So, it's sort of it's a sort of a constant punishment that the state wants to that the state wants to you know that the state wants the journalist to face. It's a double kind of punishment. First, your work is stopped because we had been given a verbal warning that you have to stop. You have to stop your operations, and then, then all of a sudden, then you are also detained. So it's a kind of a double punishment that you have to face, and it's merely for the fact that you have committed journalism, and you have been reporting facts and trying to tell the truth from the ground without any political bias, without any social bias, or without anything. You're just trying to report the truth as it is. But unfortunately, the state right now wants to have a say in everything, and they want to decide our content too, which is very unfortunate in any democratic setup.
We know how the media has been intimidated in Kashmir, but yet there is independent media. As you yourself are a part of, your organization is the Kashmiriyat is a news organization based in Srinagar. So,
Hmm.
could you tell us how difficult? What are your challenges as an independent media person now in Kashmir, or how would you compare your situation with those of the leading newspapers that are partly controlled by the state because they have a lot of resources that are dependent on the advertisement and everything. So how would you compare your independent journalism and the mainstream journalism that has been going on for decades in Kashmir now?
See, I feel that the Indian government has resorted to various tactics to prevent independent media from criticizing the government, and and in a recent case, they have also wanted journalists to they have wanted to criticize, they have wanted to stop journalists from reporting about the pandemic. Recently, in this blatant attempt to muzzle the press freedom, the government of India on recently on March 31, I think perhaps it was March 31, that the government of India led by Narendra Modi petitioned the India's Supreme Court to bar the media from publishing information about COVID-19. But it was not cleared by the Supreme Court, and the court later directed the media to refer and publish the official version of the developments regarding COVID-19. Though the freedom of press and the freedom of speech is one of the key fundamental rights outlined in the Indian Constitution, and while press freedom may be constitutionally guaranteed, it's evident that democracy in practice and in theory is very different. I What I see is, the mainstream media in India, and the mainstream media in Kashmir, and the independent journalism in Kashmir is sort of facing the similar challenge everywhere, because the Indian government right now, as I said earlier, there have been cases there have been cases of attacks on press, since the coming of BJP into power in 2014. Uh, there has been a lot of the attacks, in fact, on journalists have increased manifold, and critics have accused the the Modi led government of suppressing the free voices in media and propagating the other side of what we call as the embedded journalism. I'll give you a recent case on 11th of May, I think. In the second week of May, there's a journalist, Dhaval Patel. He's the owner of this online. He's the owner and editor, in fact, of this online news portal, Face of the Nation. He's from Gujarat, and he was detained and charged with sedition for writing an article about the possibility of a government change in Gujarat because in the escalation of the number of cases in the state. Patel was, I mean, he was the guy was charged with Section 124A, which is of the Indian Penal Code, which is the Sedition Act. And earlier there have been cases like those of Gauri Lankesh. I mean, she was a close friend. She was a Bangalore-based journalist who wrote a who was the editor of a prominent newspaper out there, the Lankesh Patrika. She was she was shot dead, and you know initially what happened was there was a lot of hate campaign on social media against her, and these campaigns which have a political backing, and all of a sudden a person comes, and these attacks are always followed by these online attacks. Online threats are always followed by violence, which is propagated, and which is unfortunately supported by the state. In Kashmir, what has happened in the recent past is, prominent journalists, prominent newspapers, people who work with prominent newspapers uh, have been summoned to police stations. They have been questioned in context with their news stories, with their operations, with the source of their income. That's what happened in our case also. I mean, it's also it, it's also similar out in the India. I feel my arrest and whatever is happening in Kashmir with independent media is a smaller picture of the larger thread of attacks on journalists and on journalism. The state wants to festoon us into believing that everything is fine, and they want the public of the nation of India to believe that everything is fine, which unfortunately is not true. I mean, the escalation of attacks on India, I mean, on social activists, on political activists, on everybody. I mean, you are trying to divide, you are trying to polarize the nation into a broader category of nationalists and anti-nationals. I mean, that's what you're doing with the media. You're lining them up in a queue. Okay, this is the nationalist, which is the good media. This is the anti-nationalist. Unfortunately, it's very unfortunate that the the Constitution of India that you know that provides us the freedom to express ourselves under Article 19. I mean, it gets very sad when the same government that swears by that constitution does not allow us those rights, and rather tramples and
Right. Now, Mr. Shibli, do you also, you have been saying, sort of comparing the situation of press in mainland India and Kashmir, and you say it's just a smaller picture of the, of the larger thing. So, do you
Mhm.
think that you, after your detention now, will be able to work as a journalist with the same courage as you would have done before your detention? Did your courage as a journalist, is it threatened, or has your stance on your profession hardened?
See, Ruba, we need to understand. I mean, people need to understand that the media plays an important role in democracy, in any democracy for that case. And we as journalists serve as an agency of the people to gather news for them. It's for this reason that freedom of press has been emphasized in all democratic setups throughout the world. Uh, while it was not permitted under feudal and authoritarian
Yeah,
regimes, people also have to understand that media has become a powerful tool in their hands. Because earlier they could not express themselves through the established organs of power. Rather,
right.
uh, you know those organs were in the hands of these feudal and imperialistic and arrogant rulers. So right now the picture globally has changed. The media has become a powerful tool in the hands of common masses. you know the
Would
public.
it personally, my question was, did it personally affect you, and would you continue
I'm
doing
coming on
journalism?
that. I'm coming
Yeah,
on that. I'm
yeah.
coming on that. So letting our freedom be curbed and be festooned will ultimately mean giving up power. For people, it will mean
Mm.
giving up their power. We as journalists have to understand that there are a lot of stories. I mean, there are a lot of stories that need to be told. I mean, that's what I personally feel. And I have got into these no-go zones that used to be no-go zones earlier, and I feel there's a duty upon me to tell these stories. And these things. I mean, I mean, the level of intimidation and the level of harassment I have faced in the past years. Yes, yes. Initially, when I came back, I was thinking whether I should continue my work as a journalist or not. In fact, I'll tell you an interesting case. Uh, when I came back to Kashmir after a period of almost 9 months, I was, a lot of people came to meet me, and there are a lot of new people, actually young people who are studying journalism right now and who have just started their work as
Right.
journalists. They all of them are reconsidering journalism as their as a career. But for me, it's initially I was also skeptical, uh, uh, whether I should really continue being a journalist or not. Because you are being harassed merely for being a journalist. So it sort of gets very confusing at times. But ultimately, as I said earlier, uh, it's very important for me as a journalist to tell those stories that need to be heard. So yeah, there may be a slight confusion whether I should continue my journalism with the same passion or not. But at the end, I think it's more attractive to me. It's more compelling to me to tell those stories to public that the world outside needs to hear.
Well, that is really important, and that should be the courage that we all, and particularly those who are working in inside Kashmir, have to
Yes.
have. With the recent arrests and the attack, I would call it as on many journalists, it has been really threatening and intimidating. But well, we really salute your courage, and we really, really appreciate what you have been doing, and we hope that you have a better days in your profession and your life as well. And it was a great discussion with you. Thank you so much for speaking to me tonight.
Thank you. It was
Thank
nice
you.
speaking.
Will Thank you. Now, we will have one more journalist from Kashmir with us in a while, but we'll need to take a short break and we'll be back in a while. Keep watching Salam Media, and you can watch this broadcast on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Salam Media. Keep listening. Thank you.
Listen to يا رحمن يا رحيم. Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your five-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042 203 1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering. يا رب العالمين. Listen to
Hello and welcome back to the Ruwah Shah show, and we're talking about Kashmir and the situation of media in particular in Kashmir Valley after August 5, with the Indian government booking a lot of journalists, veteran journalists, including a 26-year-old woman, Masrat Zehra, under draconian laws. The media in Kashmir has been definitely intimidated by the state, and the work of journalists has been affected. So we have with us an editor of Kashmir-based news website called the Kashmir Wala. His name is Fahad Shah, and we'll be having Fahad with us. Yes. Assalamu alaikum, Fahad.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us.
Assalamualaikum. Walaikum salam. Thanks for inviting me.
Fahad, you are the editor of the Kashmir Wala, and you were recently targeted by the state. You have been called by the police a couple of times for questioning. What exactly is going on?
Well, the situation for journalism does not start like just a month ago, or I was questioned. It is not the first time that this has happened. It's a pretty long story that journalism in Kashmir has been very difficult for journalists to work. It is not easy to tell a story, and especially when you are a Kashmiri yourself and you're writing about your own people, it becomes much more difficult because the first thing that happens is that you are seen through this prism of being biased because you're born here, you're writing about your particularly like you're mostly writing about your neighbors, the people, your neighboring districts, areas. So it is seen that whatever you are saying is mixed with the emotional feelings that you have. But despite that, the Kashmiri journalists have been very professional journalists and they have been telling stories from all sides, from all the angles for last so many decades. And in the 90s, the situation was not as it has been become today. And even in the past, also, it was a bit different. But earlier, also before 2019, whether it was 2016 or it was 2010, there was some sort of pressure on the journalists. In the past, also, journalists have been, either kidnapped or they have been killed, they have been questioned, and stuff like that has been happening. But things have changed considerably after the 5th of August 2019, when the Indian government abrogated the semi-autonomous status of the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir, and there was a clampdown. Complete communication blackout was imposed. That it was completely impossible. There's a thing that when you tell this to other journalists abroad or somewhere, you tell them that there's no way of communication. A lot of people don't even understand or believe that there could be a place where journalists does not have internet or even phone or even fixed like line connection to communicate with their editors or other people outside. But that was the situation for months, that we as journalists were not able to report. We had to find different ways and means and alternative ways to tell the story. And you must have heard that a lot of people had to send stories or photographs or videos through thumb drives and given to the passengers at the airport, and they would then take that to Delhi, and from there stories would be filed. And that was the situation in the initial few weeks. And after that, the government started this media center and people started going there, but it was all under the government. So you know how such installation really works. But
Right.
there was
You know,
a
there was a
constant
fair
pressure on.
psychosis, Fahad, that was
Sorry.
created by, there was a fair psychosis that was created by the state. Did it mean that, the state wants journalists to self-censor what they are writing? Because there's a lot of independent media. You work as an editor of an independent media news organization. So this fair psychosis, how does it work, and what are the challenges that it creates for a journalist inside Kashmir?
Well, fear psychosis was created and it has a context. When August 5th happened, we remember that we used to meet those days somewhere, and there was constantly this chat going around among the journalists that, those journalists will be picked up, this journalist will be arrested, this will happen, that will happen. And I don't know where those words came from, where all of that came from, but it certainly built a kind of pressure, and it certainly built this fear psychosis among the journalists that if you write something, something may happen. And in between, there was an instant where this one of the journalists, Gauhar Gilani, was stopped from going abroad, from going Germany, and he was put on a no-fly list, and he was back in Kashmir. And that really changed the situation for journalists, and it felt that okay, something is really happening because he has been a vocal speaker on TV and he has been writing. So when that happened, the fear psychosis really increased, and it did work to a lot of extent, because if you see that a lot of journalism scene really changed, and mainly the traditional media changed the way the editorials happened. There were no editorials in traditional media outlets or the newspapers. Even the op-ed pages were empty. They were not talking about politics or August clampdown or anything, and there wasn't much of the coverage given to the incidents during those months. But being independent media house and a newspaper, we tried to report as much as we could, even in those months, even though the distribution of the paper was really difficult. But we continued publishing stories. We went to Delhi to publish the stories, and I think now that fear psychosis still remains. It hasn't
Right.
ended, because you see today also there is the same fear psychosis, and that is why we as an independent house have been trying to say that you can save journalism, you can save storytelling only by remaining independent and by sustaining independent media. Because once you become traditional and you become big, there are a lot of pulls and pressures that can be pulled, and it is becoming very difficult for those kinds of media outlets to report in this time.
Right, Fahad, we earlier had Mr. Kazi Shibli with us, and he had spent like 9 months in detention. You did a story on him, and which was really heartbreaking. But he was comparing the situation of press in general in India and Kashmir, like with since the BJP, the Bharatiya Janata Party, came into power in India, the situation has been somewhat similar everywhere. But I personally believe that because of the changes the government wanted to make in Kashmir, with its demography, with the removal of semi-autonomy, as you said, and now the domicile law. So, what do you think is this government doing when it comes to Kashmir? Has it completely lost control in terms of the politics of Kashmir being such a sensitive conflict?
Well, if we look at the political aspect of the region right now, what has happened in after the clampdown, it looked like that things were under control, everything was done, and there was no protest. There went mass protest, as one would have expected will happen after August. But I think now we have moved into June 2020, and it has been several months since then. And if we look at the past few months, the incidents of violence have considerably increased, and there has been reports of recruitment in the militancy. Also, there have been some new outfits have been formed. There has been a jump in the gunfights between the militants and the forces. And you also have seen in the past few weeks that at certain situations and points there have been protesters also, because you see in the recent gunfights, I think in several of them, people have come out and started to protest and engaged into clashes between them and the forces, which wasn't happening in the initial few months after the August. And I think this situation is slightly going back to what it was. There is no control on those things. And politically also, there is no political process in Kashmir right now, because after August, the unionist politicians who fight elections were detained, and few of them are still under detention, and there is no way out for them. If they go and do the same thing and fight the elections, what are they going to tell the people? Even their own voters that who used to vote for them, leave aside the people who boycott elections, but what do they have for them? They have nothing. So that's why there is this political vacuum. And while this political vacuum is going on, and while there is a global pandemic, what is happening is that a very controversial law has been passed, that is the domicile rule, which gives access to a lot of people on a lot of
Right.
jobs and lands and different aspects of the region, which earlier was only exclusively for the state subjects of these of the residents here. So the domicile rule is a one major aspect, and that has been just that has been implemented in this pandemic only while we are fighting, to save lives. And there are other few smaller things that are happening at the administrative level, that are transfers are happening. There was this bank, JK Bank in Kashmir, which was founded here, and everything. It is nomenclature is changing. The people who are heading it are changing. Different things are
Right,
happening slowly
nomenclature
and
is changing.
quietly.
Fahad, these are very politically important moves that have been taken and are still being taken into consideration. Like in this time, storytelling becomes really important, right? You, as a media person, know it, and you are also an author of the book, so the only weapon one has in this situation is writing and storytelling. How can one be fair to your profession in this situation by being honest? And how can we protect our lives at the same time? You have seen your friends being detained, spending months in jails. How can you protect your lives and tell the stories at the same time?
It's a very interesting thing because it doesn't happen in Kashmir only. It has happened in several parts, and of course, this you mentioned Shibli, who was here before. He is my longtime friend, and it was a very traumatic period when he was in jail, and we're very happy that he is back. But you also see that there are other journalists who have been booked under a very draconian law of the anti-terrorism law for just doing whatever the work they have been doing. And it's impressive that they still continue to do that work. And the answer this question is very interesting to mention that after the police questioning or after anything that happens to me, some of the people ask, even my staff sometimes ask, like, what now? What are we going to do now, after this? The point is that as a journalist, there's only one thing, that is the fact. As a journalist, our job, my job, is to report the facts. And I think till the time whatever you are doing is factual, you are supported, backed by the professional rules and regulations of your field, nothing can hamper you. But of course, there are ways and means that you can be silenced in different ways, and we have seen that happening in Kashmir in lot of ways, and it can happen. But I think as a journalist, if you are really if you have taken, it's like doctors take an oath that they will treat anyone who comes to them on the stretcher, who is injured or anything with a disease. The same way is for the journalist, that whatever the story you get, whatever the story you have to tell the story to to the people, and you cannot stop it, you cannot hide it, or you cannot run away from that. And I think there is this slight hope left in Kashmir and within the journalists of Kashmir, that despite so much, despite such a worst communication blackout, clampdown, despite the FIRs against our colleagues, despite the questioning, despite even the assassination in 2018, one of the very veteran journalist, Shujat Bukhari, was assassinated in broad daylight outside his office. Despite that, people have continued telling the story. And I think that is the best part. And I think if we keep doing that, if we continue doing that, we can still keep hope of storytelling alive in Kashmir, and that is the only way that can save this profession and the storytelling in Kashmir.
Right, Fahad, we have a question from Kashmiri, and he asks that what about the credibility of the journalists, particularly of those in the mainstream media, and how does the audience receive their reporting in Kashmir? I believe is asking about those who work with the Indian mainstream media.
There are four ways I would say that the story of Kashmir is covered. There is one that is the foreign media. There is another that is Delhi and Bombay. They're sitting in the studios, and they can call even Badgam, which is in central Kashmir, they call that part of South Kashmir. That is the level of reporting that they do from Delhi. And there are journalists who are in Kashmir, but they are working for the national media. And then there are journalists who are local and they're working locally, like us, independent. We are just like few of us left. We are in a minority here, but there are different aspects how the story of Kashmir is told. How I will say that the local journalists or independent journalists are trying to tell the story is very hyper local, trying to go behind the news, what is happening, and trying to tell the story of people in that way and in a more depth. And then the people who are from Kashmir and they're working for the national media outlets, they also try very hard. I'm not sure if all of them will be able to say this, but I know how difficult it is for them to function in the atmosphere that they are. I have seen a lot of my friends sending stories, and those stories are not published. I have seen people writing stories, and those stories come back, or those stories are killed by editors in Delhi or Bombay. So it is a tough job for them. And that the way Delhi and Bombay, mostly the news channels, are reporting Kashmir, it is very hard for these national media journalists sometimes to even go to certain places, because it becomes difficult for them. Because anyway, like, sometimes we also are told that, what has media done, this is what you guys say, you guys are liars and all that stuff. And that atmosphere is being created by the TV news channels, and that is a big problem. So there is a foreign media that is reporting, and then the foreign media is accused of being biased. And sure, like, everybody sees how news channels put BBC and Al Jazeera every time on TV and claim that these are the fake news spreaders and stuff like that. So I think there is this vilification, there is this criminalization of journalism, of reportage on Kashmir, that is happening. And mainly so, there's this one senior journalist recently pointed out, it is a very important thing that he pointed out. He said that the opinion in Kashmir has been criminalized. Like, you can't even have an opinion. Like, earlier what used to happen, that you are a journalist, you are an analyst, you see things differently from different perspectives, then you are the person that you can give an opinion on a certain thing. What is happening politically in Kashmir today, or if China is doing something at the border, how this is going to impact Kashmir's regional politics or India's domestic politics. You can't even really have this opinion freely now. You can't even tweet at times, because
Yeah.
even a tweet
Or,
can, book you into something.
yes, exactly. I was going to mention about Masrat Zehra, 26-year-old photojournalist who was booked for posting a photo which was already published in an international organization on her social media page. And the journalist has been booked under the draconian anti-terrorism laws, as you said. Fahd, Kashmir media is mainly dependent. I'm talking about the print media, particularly, the most leading newspapers. Those are dependent on the government advertisement mostly, and somehow it confines their limits, right? So given the state control, and do you think that it's time to change the revenue model, uh, from ad based news to reader subscription news, some sort of system? And is there a possibility of any such model coming into place?
So this is a brilliant question, and I don't think many people ask this question, but this is a very important question that should be asked. Is that, of course, why the story of Kashmir is getting ruptured and it getting infected, is because of this, that the papers, the newspapers, who we today, a lot of people I see on social media accuse newspapers of not reporting, not doing this and not doing that. But when someone goes to the same people, when someone is there and telling you that, okay, we are going to change the revenue model, we are not going to be dependent on the government ads, we are not going to be dependent on the corporate ads, so help us sustain, this is the revenue model. So the worldwide, if you see in America, in Europe and everywhere, like, look at Guardian, such a big newspaper, what they are doing for the last few years, they are in profit, because people are paying them, people are supporting them with as little as they can, and that is how independent media can sustain and remain alive. And I think it is time for people also to realize that if we want truth, if we want reportage, if we want in-depth stories, we have the power to shape the media narrative, we have the power to shape how the stories will be told. By doing what? So you pay for the media that you see is reporting the way you want them report to, or you write to them, you tell them, okay, you have to write, you have to report on these issues, that's how we are going to support you. There are different revenue models now. There is a membership model, we ourselves have just launched a membership model and subscription model. There is another organization, Free Press Kashmir, they have launched a similar kind of model. There is another outlet, the Kashmiriya, they are also working on the similar kind of model, where people they'll ask people to pay for sustaining the organization. And I think that is the only model. And in places like these, where there are smaller regions and smaller places, where it is very difficult to even get big grants, and you don't have big foundations in Kashmir, you don't have something like that. So you are
Yeah.
dependent on people. So I think the
You're
people who
basically
read
talking
these
about
stories, they need to help.
crowdfunding. You're basically talking about crowdfunding models, Fahad.
That
But
that is the only model that will function.
there have been cases in 2017. I remember a lot of businessmen were also booked under various laws. So the state does not leave any way or opportunity for anybody to create such opportunities, basically. And there is a continuous blocking of internet that happens in Kashmir. So your papers are mostly internet based, your news is information is happening mostly internet based. How would you manage to create news content in fair manner with all those challenges? I mean, I'm sure it is still very difficult, but if you're even dreaming of doing that, how do you dare to dream that?
What is the situation of us? I would say, like, the media or the entrepreneurs in Kashmir is like that frog which is in a well, and for years we try to climb the wall to get out of the well, and then somebody just comes and pushes you back to the
True.
pit of the well. And that's what has been happening. First you have the floods, everything goes away, then 15 you try to do something, then the 16 uprising happens, everything gets shut, then 17, 18, and then the 19 clamp
Yeah.
down happens, everything gets shut. So
That's a very
continuously that's
important
happening.
terminology, Fahad. If we look at it from the last 12 years since 2008, now it's more than a decade, and we have seen phases through which Kashmir has been through. Would you call it like Kashmir has not been in a normal state for over a decade now, because those small phases, 2 months and 6 months in between all these uprisings and different things, is not what normal life is likely.
I think, like, both of us have seen other parts of our world also. We have seen some cities. So you can agree with me saying that since the time you start seeing things when you're born and you're like 5, 6 years old in Kashmir, you start realizing that something is wrong. You start realizing, the wind in Kashmir itself feels like very weird. It doesn't it's always like weird. Like, I tell my friends that, when I drive and there is a lot of people outside in the market, and there are cars and there's transport and there is huge rush, I find, like, is this reality or what is it happening? Because there is so much, familiarity with this shutdown, with everything shut, with barricades. It reminds me of that scene in based on Basharat's Curfew Night book in Haider movie, where this guy is not able to enter his home, and
Yeah.
then this actor comes and frisks him, and then only he is able to enter. So that is the psychological impact of the conflict, that even if how much you try, you can create skyscrapers and buildings in a place, but psychologically you cannot change it. Psychologically and mentally, you have to, there are different
I mean,
solutions
I'm
to that.
sure
It can't happen.
there are psychological effects on everybody in Kashmir, every Kashmiri, even if you leave Kashmir. I believe if you leave Kashmir, you might as well leave Kashmir, but Kashmir will never leave you. So, um,
Exactly.
but as a journalist, what are this has reporting in such tense and hardened conditions impacted your health in any way?
Definitely, like, I wouldn't like say it hasn't affected. It does affect, like, so there are things that you see while you're on reporting, and you can't sleep at night, and you keep thinking about those things. And when you're working here for so many years, I have some senior friends who I speak to, and when I see them awake at 4 a.m. in the morning, and I'm like, what is wrong with this person? Why is this person not sleeping? Because, but I understand what is happening. You are not able to, you're not functioning normally, your body is not normal anymore. And then constantly things keep happening, you're always worried, okay, how is it going to be how is it going to be tomorrow? Because it is definitely a place that one day you will wake up, and the next morning there will be no internet, no phone, nothing, everything will be shut. You won't be surprised anymore, no, because that is the way it has been. That's the way situation has been here. And living in that kind of atmosphere where there is this uncertainty constantly looming over your head, your life is very, it's like very installments, like it's like in bits and pieces
Hanging by a
thrown
thread.
away somewhere. It's like very, I don't know what is happening, but there is this slight hope that you have of something that keeps you alive. And I think perhaps for a lot of people it is faith, because faith tells you that you can't you have to be hopeful of better tomorrow, and that's how people continue keeping going on with their life. Otherwise it doesn't feel all right.
Right. Well, that is really, really important for all of us, Fahad, to be hopeful of better times and, of better times for media in Kashmir. You people have been very courageous. You people have been doing amazing work, and we hope that you continue doing that with no threats to your life. And we hope to see you doing good work, continue doing good work, Fahad. Thank you so much for joining me
Thank
tonight. It
you.
was a great
Thank you.
discussion. We hope to see you
Thank
again
you.
very soon.
See
Thank you
you.
so
Thank you.
much. With that, we
Thank
wrap
you.
our show tonight, and we'll be back next week on Tuesday again at 8 to 9 p.m. South African time. You can watch the broadcast on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Salaamedia. Thank you so much for watching us. Please share this video if you liked it, and keep listening to Salam Media. Assalamu alaikum.